The anointment offering in the ancient Egyptian world had a variety of uses in the daily life and funerary rituals and temples' rules of services. They were used in taking care of the bodies and skin, as well as in the rituals of opening the mouth and in burial and in the scenes and texts of offerings in the tombs. The offering of anointment is considered one of the most important offerings presented by the king to the deities. The importance of anointments is manifested in offering the king the power and vitality that he got from their ability to resurrect him. One of the most important types of anointments is the anointment offering called Mejet. It's an offering known since the Pyramids texts. The ritual can be performed by presenting a jar of anointment, Mejet, or 2 or 3 or 4 jars of anointments. The king could appear in many scenes holding a long jar of anointments. Sometimes the king covers his smallest finger with a cover of silver to protect it and puts the anointment on the forehead of Horus. The deity Shesmo is a lord of anointments and oils, is responsible also for preparing the anointment and the oil used in rituals, and we find in the temples of Edfu and Gandhara a recording of prescriptions of these anointments. By presenting anointments to the deities, the king hopes that the god returns back his offerings by giving him a special lab to produce such anointments and also to help in spreading fear amongst his enemies and thus guarantee his victory over them. Collars and jewelry are considered amongst the most important offerings served in the temples, amongst the decorative offerings, for they serve a great role in protecting and keeping the one who wears them safe. Collars are usually used as amulets to be worn or hanged around the neck for the purpose of pushing away evil and protect its carrier. The necklace of Usech is one of the most important necklaces presented in that ritual. It's a white collar composed of several rows of beads. Its both ends have different symbolic figures and was used in the celebrations during the Old Kingdom and in the funerary rituals and was mentioned within the different lists of offerings. The offering of Usech collar was a funerary ritual in the ritual of opening the mouth, and it helps in the resurrection of the deceased. The chapter number 158 of the Book of the Dead is known by the chapter of the Usech collar, and it represents a magical spell the deceased says after wearing the collar. There is also the offering of the chest jewel, which are the smallest palettes decorated with drawings and hanged in a cord or thread or ribbon. The offering of the weighing part of the collar is known as menhiyat. There is also the chest wear and the collar and the bracelet presented to the gods in the New Kingdom temples and continued throughout the late periods until the Greek-Roman period, when the jewelry took different shapes. The collar is like the barrier that protects the chest from the outer world, which is evident from its name Wija, which means the untouchable. The offerings of religious symbols and scepters, like the scepter of Herib, are included within the selection of the sacred symbols of the gods. presenting that offering is done with god Amun-Ra only. There are also the offerings of the scepter of Hika, and El-Waj, and El-Was, and Nekhekh and Hajj, and other symbols related to gods and the divine power. The offering of the sacred symbols was presented among the scenes of the daily services of the temple. There are other types of the offerings of sacred symbols, like the offering of the jet pillar, and the offering of Shabbat, and the sistrum, and Minit, and the offering of the Ujat eye, and the offering of the royal name, and the offering of the Heb mark, which symbolizes the festivals, and the offering of birds. All these scenes that specialize in presenting offerings and sacred symbols may reflect the ideology of erecting the Ma'at, and it's a center point of all the rituals performed by the king in front of the deities, hoping to be offered the legitimacy of ruling on earth and to join the world of the gods after he dies. The king in ancient Egypt is usually pictured presenting all types of crowns to the main deities in the temples related to the kinship. The purpose of presenting crowns is clear in the reversed benefit which the king hopes to gain, for he wishes from that, just like all other types of offerings in the temples, to be rewarded back with the divine legitimacy and to be crowned on the throne of the country by the gods. Usually, gods like Horus, Set, and Wajet and Nekhbit participate in these scenes as an embodiment to the legitimacy of the south and the north. The scenes of presenting offerings in the temples in the era of the New Kingdom never appeared, for they started to be shown in the Egyptian temples from the Ptolemaic period. Each crown holds a certain symbol in the offering, either by returning the offerings of the king or as explained in the texts which accompany the scenes, like the one in Edfu Temple. It says, "I offer you the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt, in the north and in the south. The eagle and the cobra ornament your head." In case of picturing gods holding crowns in front of the principal god of the temple or any of the other deities, this scene is considered a coronation and not an offering. In it, the main god is crowned as a lord of the temple, sitting on the thrones of his temple, being the creator god and the oldest and greatest god who offers life to the gods and all creatures. In two scenes of coronation and offering crowns in Dendera temple, which aren't different from each other, the gods of the octonary appear in one scene of an offering and coronation of goddess Hasur, who is described in the scenes as Hathor, the lady of Dendera, the Eye of Ra, the lady of the sky, the lady of all deities, preceded by God Tot, who is described in the texts accompanying the scenes as Jehuti, the great lord of El Ashmunin. Each of them comes in the scene carrying the offering board, above which a crown is placed. They are in the following order of Nonet, Nun, Hawhet, Hoh, Kauket, Kok, Nyaunet, Nyau. Then the scene is finalized with the king, who also presents the double crown to goddess Hathor. The offering of El Ma'at is one of the most important and the most kind of offerings which the kings were keen on picturing in the temples, for its significance and great importance. The offering of El-Ma'd confirms the task of the king in achieving the system or the might on earth, and thus pleases the gods. The concept of El-Ma'd was a measuring order that is set for everything and represents the foundation of the world and all what coincides with the goals of the Creator God. Thus, humans have a duty of keeping and establishing it and bringing back El-Ma'd and order to its correct form in case it was subjected to any misfunction or disturbance. Since the view of the Egyptian to the Ma'd to be a core and a materialistic factor on which all the world lives, and its being a force to the gods and the living and the dead human, thus the coffin's texts mention that the gods live upon El-Ma'd. They have asserted El-Ma'd upon earth, and its assertion on earth is the responsibility of the king who represents the deities among humans and lives like them upon El-Ma'd. The offering of El-Ma'd summarizes in a very symbolic picture all what the cults and the offerings presented to the gods and all the daily rituals of services presented in the temples and the tombs and all the offerings given. Thus, not a single Egyptian temple is free of the offering scene of El-Ma'd within the various reliefs and religious scenes and the scenes of offerings and rituals. It was an obligation of the king to establish El-Ma'd on earth, and that was embodied by the pharaoh, presenting the Ma'd as an offering to the gods as a symbol of his establishment of order and justice. Within the finalizing frame of the rituals of different offerings comes the offering of presenting a meal to the deity, like the bread offering, being one of the most important types of food and offerings. The white bread tahej was the mostly used type of bread, and the cake of shat was next to it, and includes giving 2 or 3 cakes or biscuits. The white bread is distinguished by its pointed shape. The big bread tower, stuffed with resin and honey, was presented hot. There was also the offering of bread and chenes, and it was mentioned a lot on the walls of Dendera temple within the scenes of the offering. The texts say, "I bring you the bread chenes. It's your eyes, so may your majesty eat from it. I put it in front of you, so eat it. It's pure." In another place in Dendera temple, the text says, "Take the bread chenes. I baked it for you in the morning and brought it to the bakery, so you can eat as much as you like." The god called Nibi was the one responsible of the grains from which bread is made, and it was he who made bread and created the crops. Usually, the king presents the bread, being the son of Nibi. There are also the offerings of the food of meat. The meat is usually taken from the animals that represent the god of evil Set. Consuming such meat is a kind of demolishing the bad vibes of that god and destroying it. The meat offerings were presented to the vicious goddesses like goddess Mahit and Tifnut and Nekhbit. There were also the grilled meat offerings and the live geese or slaughtered or grilled ones. The text which accompany the meat offering in Dendera temple says, "Take these pieces of the cows and cattle and deer's meat. May your heart be merry with the pieces of the enemies who are unloyal to your majesty." offering of Ilmait points that the task of the king is to establish Ilmait. So the offering here is a symbol of accomplishing the job he's responsible of. The offering of Ilmait has appeared since the Middle Kingdom, but hasn't appeared again until the age of Thutmose III. The scene has been recorded on the wall reliefs of most of the Egyptian temples. In it, the king stands in front of the deity, presenting the mite with his hand or above a pot. Ilmait offering is usually in the figure of a small statue of Goddess Mait, the goddess of justice and order, and the intact universal system. She sits, and her head is topped with the feather of Ilmait, and in her hand the symbol of life. In very rare cases, we see just the presentation of Ilmait feather, and that was in the temple of El Sobua of King Ramesses II. Amongst the temples in which the presentation of Ilmait appeared is the temple of Amun-Ra in El Karnak temple, and the temple of Aton in Karnak, and the temple of Seti I in Abydos and Luxor temple. Usually, there is a text, and in it an offering form, which includes the sentence of an offering of Mait to the god of Mait, or Hanek Mait en Neb Mait. The offering of Mait was usually represented to the male gods and not the female ones. At the front of the gods who were pictured receiving the Mait are Amun, Amun-Ra, Hurachti, Amun-Ra Kamut F, Amun-Mim, Ra-Hur-Akhti Betah, Khonsu and Shu and Osiris, and Saturn Atom, and Monto, and Khnum and Sobek, and Hathor and Isis, and Min. The king presented the Mait as an offering on daily basis to the gods, as a tangible proof on him being their representative in his divine task within the frame of Ilmait.